Hi, everyone. The PSD2 isn't new. In fact, it is currently under review. Thus, the time is ripe to have a closer look at the developments of the past that heralded the era of open banking. Being on the verge of open finance now, we often hear that past developments were just the beginning. So what can we expect for the future? I'm Sebastian, CSO at Friendsurance and also board member in the topic group Digital Insurance and InsurTech at Bitkom. And I welcome everyone to our panel, Open Finance, another buzzword or takeoff of the European finance space. Super happy to discuss this exciting topic with our amazing panelists, Dr. Lea Siering, CRO at finleap Connect, Jan van Vonno, please come on stage, Director of Research, Tink, and Adrian Elkmann, Evangelist at Moss. Please have a seat. So nice to have you. I'll put my chair here so I can see you guys. So yes, before we start, please, can you quickly introduce yourself, but in 3 sentences, which is who are you, what is your role, and please decide on very quickly, no details yet, open finance is a buzzword or will finally take off? On what side are you? Lea, you want to start?
Yes, pleasure. Good afternoon or good evening, depends on how you feel at the moment. My name is Lea Siering. I'm, as you can see over there, CRO, which stands for Chief Risk Officer at finleap Connect. That's an open banking player, a German institution being licensed with the German Supervisory Authority. Coming back to your question, I mean, maybe first of all, we should give an excuse to you because you are not shown on the large scale. And actually, we don't look like the pictures over there, but still, I hope you recognize us. But getting back to your question, is it a buzzword or not? Yes, it's a buzzword, but it's an amazing buzzword, which will also kick off. So yes and no.
Yes and no. All right. Thanks. Jan.
Hey everyone, Jan van Vonno, Director of Research at Tink. If you see any of Tink's marketing content and sort of vision in terms of where it's heading, it's often coming out of my office. I hold the pen on most of that work. And I also support our product organization and public affairs teams and sort of educating regulators and industry working groups in terms of where open banking should be heading. So the question whether open finance is a buzzword or not, yes, it's absolutely a buzzword like open banking. That's also a buzzword because it's here, it's all around us. But the efforts that we're taking as an industry to structure it, I think will allow it to excel way beyond the use cases that we see today. We can talk more about that during this panel.
Awesome, thanks. They were very fast 3 sentences. Thanks a lot. Adrian, sorry for the picture, which is missing.
No worries. Adrian, Evangelist at Moss. Moss is a fintech here in Berlin. We digitize spend management for mid-market corporates in Germany, the UK, and the Netherlands. We, in the end, then work on exactly what, to go to the second, last question, open finance, we help bridging the gap between what is currently working in silos. So I'm very much confident that it's not only a buzzword, but in the end, it is the future, and we cannot sort of work without it because that's where we're all headed.
All right, cool. Thanks for the introduction. So it's super cool to have you guys here in our panel. But before we start with the actual discussion, let's find out what is the definition of open finance. Jan, can you help the audience with a quick definition just as a common ground?
Well, as a head of research, I'd hope I'd be able to do that. So the way that we look at open finance is we would say it's a description of the exchange of financial data and services between institutions and third-party providers in order to deliver enhanced capabilities and experiences to the market. And that means that this definition would include that exchange between banks, but also non-bank institutions that might have information about your tax or your pension or information about you as a citizen that is relevant for the financial services and provision of financial services within the respected industries. So it goes a little bit beyond open banking. Open banking is really targeted at the type of account information that might exist at your bank, payments data, and then extending beyond PSD2, savings data or loan data. And open finance really takes a broader perspective of other financial verticals and segments, and looks at how can we innovate around that.
Beautiful. Understand. Thanks. Lea, anything to add from your perspective?
Of course, I always add. But it was well done, Jan. But however, as we all know, there's a consultation going on at the moment on open finance. And I think the European Commission did an amazing job. So I just wrote down what I found in this consultation. Namely, it is defined, and I like it because it's short and precise. It says it's access and reuse of customer data, with consent, of course, across a range of financial services. So it's exactly what you said, a bit longer, but I think it's a good definition.
All right. How about further verticals? I mean, you mentioned some of them, being the insurance guy in this round. How about insurance? Anything to add? Or is this included into the financial data?
In my understanding, of course, it's included. I mean, there are several problems in connection therewith, because it's not that easy then with an account, as you know, as you are from the insurance world, so to say. So to include and to connect insurance data, it's a bit more complicated because it's not that data set which is available. So it's complicated, but I think that's exactly the vision that is also included when we talk about open finance.
Awesome. So the future is bright for the customers. Let's look into business. Question to Lea. Looking back, so setting the scene, open banking has brought up new business models, just like FinLeap Connect as an example, fintechs, products, but it's still a nascent market. Why is that so? Like, what reasons do you see?
I would disagree that it's a nascent market,
Okay.
Of course. I think it's a vibrant market with a lot of opportunities, and I think we have already clearly shown that we can do a lot with open banking. But nevertheless, to answer your question, I think a good role model when it comes to use cases in connection with open banking is UK, of course, because they are way ahead in using open banking. And the problems we are facing is also psychologically on the one hand side, because in particular in Germany, a lot of people have issues in sharing their data. There have been recent studies being published where people don't want to share their data because it's just a lack of trust. And then on the other hand side, what also is always a problem also when we think about European solutions is that we are facing, of course, technical issues because it's not necessarily standardized. But maybe we can discuss this later a little bit more in detail.
Can I just interrupt on that?
Sure.
Because I think your definition that you just read out loud actually had a different description of open finance. So it's not necessarily the sharing of data, it's the access and reuse. I think it's really critical that we build trust in this ecosystem by using the right words to describe what we're doing as an industry. What we're doing is authorizing with consent and permission to access information in a confidential and secured way in order to provide a requested service that a user wants to benefit from. So the sharing of credentials or the sharing of information is really a term that is used, I think, often in the incorrect context. You can argue it's semantics, but I think as an industry, we should really try to hone in on talking about access and the reuse of that information, exactly as the Commission puts it. So I'm incredibly proud of the Commission there, because that's what I believe is going to be critical. So to help users understand what's happening when they're requesting services using these technologies.
When we say Commission, it's the EU. You have spent some time in the UK. You, Jan, are from the Netherlands. Do you see differences in what you recognize or what you have just where you have lived in the customer behavior?
I mean, I think it's really, as Lea mentioned it, in Germany, for example, we're still way behind, both in terms of sort of mindset change as well as everything that's infrastructure. We do have a few examples, like in Germany, the payback card that people use in grocery stores or in when shopping. So they're open to share their shopping habits to receive points. Same, for example, with Schufa, which is something that everybody knows, everybody needs to, everybody agrees to using this because they can't get around it. I think it's still, at some point in time, people will be aware of the opportunities and about of the chances that there are, and as Jan mentioned, access with consent, and then you know in the end what type of data you're sharing and what it's for. And once we are there, then in the end, sort of things will fall into place, and we do have a much more open finance prone world and infrastructure than currently. We're still working with certain silos that in other countries, such as the Netherlands and UK, people are much more used to, sharing the data because they know what's advantages of doing so.
You agree, Jan?
I mean, I have to disagree that the German market is behind on open finance. I think it's important to have a little bit of context here, because the UK is often sort of praised for accounting now for 5.3 million monthly active users, of which the vast majority are businesses, by the way. So don't get confused by the media when they say it's consumers, 5.3 million consumers using open banking technologies. It's not true. It's primarily businesses. So the statistics actually on the number of users, of which Tink does a huge volume, as we're doing a lot of the aggregation on behalf of bookkeeping software tools for businesses. When you're looking at open finance and go a little bit beyond the access of, for instance, PSD2 regulated information, and you start looking at, for instance, the access to loan information, mortgage information, investment information. There are plenty of firms already in Germany doing this with consent of their customers, be it businesses or consumers. For instance, in Sweden, to give an example, where Tink was originally from, during 2020, we did over 22,000 mortgage checks where we analyzed or basically retrieved the interest rates that people were paying over their mortgages so that they could refinance or move their mortgage against a lower interest rates. Obviously, interest rates were going down, down, down. And so for most people, they could save up to 900 euros per year by refinancing or moving their mortgage. Now, that access to that type of information is not regulated PSD2 information, but it is with explicit consent and access to non-PSD2 information, which I would qualify already in the step of open finance. So it is here, it is around us, but I guess the opportunity to start using this technology for the benefit for people and businesses is really is unprecedented, and I think we're really at the foothill of where it could go.
All right, do we then need to extend a definition of open finance use cases? So what I mean is, where do open finance use cases end, given that horizontal regulation is also on the way, like Data Act, PSD3, or is that not really helpful from a definition point of view?
So the Data Act is a fantastic example, as it basically applies to all data holders, whether you're a business in communication or a healthcare provider or an insurance provider. And it basically specifies that a data holder is not allowed to block an authorized third party when they can prove that they have permission to access information. Yeah, you can respond to that in a second. Article 5. It's and that basically would allow for other verticals outside of finance also to meet those conditions. Now, I think the last panel on EIDAS 2.0 is going to be critical for this to really scale, because one of the things that is going to be necessary is making sure that those third parties do identify themselves towards those data holders so that there's no accusation of identity fraud or impersonation of the user when accessing such information. And of course, the opportunity for those businesses to provide APIs is a commercial opportunity for those data holders and a lowers barrier of entry into those markets. Sorry, data.
Lea, you seem to have a slightly different opinion on this. You would like to add?
He's talking so much that I've already forgot what I wanted to say. No, I'm just kidding. I just wanted to point out that I think the Data Act is not applicable for like non-physical business models. So I think that's maybe good to know.
And why is that?
Because it's in there.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but maybe that's also another discussion point. Do we need a special data regulation when we are talking about open banking and open finance? Because here the GDPR applies, and the good thing is that it's one law, one legal framework for everything, and it's also harmonized, which is nice when you want to scale up your business in Europe. But as open finance and open data is purely related to data, you could also ask, don't we need a special regulation which focus, for example, on data activities? Mm-hmm. Because right now, this is definitely not the case. If you see open data companies are data-driven, as I said, but also they're also technical companies. And when you have a look at the regulation and how the regulator is supervising like the institutions, you could question this because basically they check something which is not the major part of the business and not showing the risk, you know what I mean? And at least I don't know how it is, for example, in the Netherlands, but in Germany, the data protection authorities are like different regulators, and they are not like in Germany, but we have like for each federal state in Germany a special data protection authority. So I think in this regard, we have to work on a little revolution to bring this regulation together, like or to bring the regulators together.
Awesome. Super happy to find some nuggets. At the same time, I would like to move the discussion a little further. Jan, you are Director Research at Tink. Tink has bought fintech systems, one of the first German banking service providers, and then Tink was bought by Visa. One personal question and then one general. How much market research does it need to then say we need a banking service provider as our own asset and I need 120 million? To that then we can be bought for 1.8 billion. So you are also allowed to skip the answer.
Yeah. A lot of market research, clearly. That's why I'm still here. Yeah, I mean the growth that the company has been on has been phenomenal, right? So I joined 4 years ago when the firm was about 50 people, and yeah, obviously with I think the financing round before I joined was about 100 million euros, and then 3 years later, Visa comes along at a 1.8 billion valuation, and so that's a crazy growth ride to be on, with all of the pains with it. I think for the entire industry, this acquisition is a signal to the market that open banking and open finance is here, and it's driving the future for the financial services industry. And when the largest payment service provider in the world sort of commits to that, I think it's an opportunity for businesses that have been previously conservative or defensive when looking at open banking as a threat. Taking a different perspective, the perspective that Visa has, one of the also partners to many of the issuers, that this is equally an opportunity for them. So a lot of market research, and I think we're, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where this takes us.
Awesome. It needs a director to do that much market research, I guess. Thanks, and congrats, of course. It's huge. It's a big signal. Also, congrats to Max and Stefan. I know you are here somewhere from FinTech Systems. Yes, they are. But my general question is more the fail to scale. So solutions we see, solutions seem to be there, but we seem to fail to scale. Do you agree? And why do you agree? Like, what is your specific approach?
So, I mean, certain solutions within the context of, for instance, PSD2 and open banking are clearly restricted by the certain articles in the delegated regulation known as the RTS, the Regulatory Technical Standards. Specifically, I'm referring to the 90-day access, for instance, which has killed a lot of the, let's say, ongoing aggregation multi-banking propositions or personal finance management propositions where you'd expect continued access, and learning that account information service providers need to re-onboard their entire customer base after 3 months clearly does not provide a foundation for scalable use cases. I mean, that's also why businesses like Tink, when PSD2 came, flocked towards larger banks as using their private connections inside a PFM or the mobile banking app service allowed us to reach a much broader audience without needing to go through that 3 months sort of SCA cycle. There are clearly some limitations in the regulations, but I think that's one thing that the European Commission during its review is scrutinizing, right? So with open finance, it does not want to create those types of scalable or scalability limitations. And so we're working very closely with the Commission to advise them on how they could shape this and in what areas we can see direct value without compromise of security or confidentiality of the consumers or businesses.
Mm-hmm. I got it. So finleap Connect, Tink, I would say you are enabling use cases and services now.
Or maybe I can add something, because
yeah, sure,
it's not only about RTS, but it's also like about, it's not fully harmonized. That has constitutional reasons, and it's fully good from a democratical perspective. But when we think about scalable European platforms, it's difficult because it's not harmonized, right? We have like the difference between directives and regulations. And in my dream world, it would only be regulations, because then like the launch or the extension of your business in Europe is way easier, because like this, we have the institution of being able to passport our license, for example, to any European member state. But that's not all you have to do as a legal department, for example, because you have to check, is my AML setup, for example, suitable for Italy, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Netherlands, whatever. Then if you have a touch point to end consumers, you have to check, are there any other consumer protection in place? You have to adapt your terms and conditions, only few examples. So it's a lot of work to do. And I think what we need in order to be able to build our own large players in Europe, we have to work on a European regulation which enables like competitors to the big techs that enter also our markets from Asia and in particular the States.
100%.
All right, I would like to come back to regulations and learnings, or do our homework in a bit. To my understanding, you both are somehow enabling use cases with your business models, and now Adrian, with Moss, you are like nailing a niche with what Moss does. In the banking industry, we often have blockers like missing standards and conflicting data, APIs, GDPR. How can we straighten out the difficulties to actually use the data in a reasonable and sustainable way from your perspective and your experience from Moss?
I mean, I think it's a sort of multifaceted game. So Moss is surely a bit of a first mover in a sense that what we try to do, we go full force in different European markets. Often we run into walls, into challenges, but in the end we need to take those as an opportunity to really change the system, change the infrastructure, talk to politicians, talk to the regulator, to really, in the end, make sure that at some point in time we have a harmonized ecosystem that is relevant for each and every player, and it is of beneficial value for each and every one, the corporates, the fintechs, the banks, because in the end we all work together and we all need to pull on the same strings to actually help things move sort of the open finance buzzword into a reality to make to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Still, your business model at Moss is exactly nailing a niche, like I said, and you created a business model based on existing infrastructure, which is of course helpful, and show that this is possible. Can you still elaborate a little bit on your business model and what exactly you do?
Yes. So Moss in the end aims to digitize the finance management across sort of, as we call it, all in one, from travel expenses to physical and virtual cards with an attached credit line, down to really, for example, even cashback. And what we see is it's much easier in the end to work with partners that are sort of the best ones in their infrastructure than sort of start all over again. And that is really something in the end, bridging the gap between those different silos and really trying to provide an harmonized infrastructure and user interface to the client, because in the end, the client doesn't want to deal with all the different hassles. The client just wants to have a smooth and well-working service, and that's in the end a bit our job as infrastructure player to really provide this to the end user, something that they can just use because they don't really care about which regulation and which legal system they need to deal with. They just want a well-working solution, and that in the end our understanding of open finance, and that's sort of the ideal or the goal where we all need to work towards too.
Okay, and I mean, Moss is now a smaller, younger company. Just last night, I learned about your valuation, so that's actually huge. So you're like an expert on this in this new wave. But in your opinion, who will benefit from a new wave of open finance? Is it the banks because they have learned? Is it still the fintechs because they have to be named every time? Is it the big techs finally, or all of them? Who will win it?
To use it, I think sort of the ones who will win are the ones that are riding the wave. So the ones that are just sitting on the beach watching will be left out. Then obviously you always have a bit of a first mover advantage. You always have the saying, the second mouse gets the cheese. But I think it's it's an open finance world. Everybody that will be working on it will be profiting from it, because you scale your products, you have a learning curve, you create new products, new partnerships, and that's something that will be beneficial for everyone in sort of in the system.
Okay. Do you guys agree, or have other examples?
Oh, I mean, obviously, everyone's riding that wave will benefit from
Everyone
it. Of course.
Sure.
But I do want to add one thing, I think, to the discussion, and that is that, I mean, right now we're talking a lot about open finance because the European Commission, the Digital Finance Framework, but also because among the incumbent banks, there's also now become the awareness that if open finance isn't regulated vertically like PSD2, the access to information and financial information and financial services can actually be commercialized too, right? So the Berlin Group, which is a standards organization that has created many of the sort of templates for how to build a PSD2 dedicated interface, has recently published a new set of standards under what it calls the Open Finance Framework, with a whole range of extended API solutions be outside the scope of PSD2, which is all dubbed Open Finance. Now, these would be what you would refer to as premium APIs, and hold the promise to generate a return on investments for banks that have been building out these banking as a service departments and APIs and competence over the last couple of years as part of the implementation of PSD2. So open finance goes actually beyond just a regulatory perspective or the sort of imagination of using data for other types of services. Banks in particular will look to benefit from this, as it provides opportunities, a revenue incentive other than a compliance incentive, to provide access to information and services.
All right. And Lea?
Maybe to get back to your question,
Yes.
who benefits from open banking and open finance? That's, in my word, the end consumer, because I think what it is about, also if you read, for example, the recitals of the PSD2, really interesting, then you will see it's all about the end consumer. It's about transparency, it's about better products, it's about like also more competition in order to increase or in order to create better products for the end consumer. And I think this is what it's all about. And we, as finleap Connect, are always trying to think about the end consumer, although we are a B2B2C company. But what we want to achieve is like a more transparent financial market with better products and better offerings. And I would also include insurance in it. I know it's your favorite topic.
Couldn't agree more.
So, yeah.
And what are, like, I mean, you are the risk expert and the regulation expert and all of that. On a more higher level or meta perspective, what are the learnings from PSD2? Also maybe looking into the market and, you know, changing of mindsets and stuff. How do you see the learnings of a PSD2 also regarding what can be done better in an open finance framework?
I think PSD2, the idea of PSD2 was to create a framework for Europe. And I think I said it already. For me, it is a problem that it's not easy to offer services across Europe because we are still facing a lot of problems and we want to create like solutions for Europe. So I think this is a problem. And you mentioned also like the RTS with the former 90 days. And that was also an issue because it's contradictory to the basic idea of open banking, open data, which is also heavily discussed at the moment. Yes. So I think the fragmentation was a mistake, and also to purely focus on like consumer accounts. What about SMEs, for example? So it was too narrow in my perspective.
So all of that somehow was a good starting point, and now also the user behavior has changed, and now the future looks bright again. Would you agree?
I mean, the future has been looking bright from the start, but there have been some hiccups and challenges along the way. And also, I think also for context, like PSD2 was enforced introduced because open banking innovation has been going on. Tink was founded in 2012. Fintech Systems was founded in 2008, I believe. 2014, excuse me. Sofort was in 2005. Thank you. Eurobits 2004 in southern Spain. I mean,
Figo.
Yes,
exactly. I mean, this innovation has been around for decades.
Exactly.
And PSD2 was an attempt by the regulator to ensure that this type of access to information happened in a secure way. And to do that, they sort of wanted to regulate such information service providers. And that's fine, but I think they've also realized by delegating the development of a regulatory technical standard to an authority, the EBA, that had no incentive for innovation or competition, but sovereign financial stability, didn't lead to the same results. So the European Commission, I think they'll think twice about sort of delegating that again as part of the review.
All right. Also like that you started to engage with the audience. Let's see if we will come to some questions by the audience, because this is now the last question. The last question goes to every one of you. If we look into the future of open finance, what will be the major push? So what has the largest influence? Is it, and I have three thoughts on my mind, and you might want to decide, is it the market will consolidate and the players get bigger and stronger, or the users will become even more digital as seen during the pandemic, or will we see huge effects by adding further data pools like insurance, health, lifestyle, so the whole topic of data interoperability? And what is your wish?
I can start, Sebastian. I think you did a major mistake because you used the word or instead of and. And if you change this, then I'm fully fine.
You want me to read it out again?
Yeah.
It's an
and I
end?
think that's the answer. I think it's every 3 points you have mentioned at the same time.
And this is also your wish?
Exactly, yeah.
Cool, got it.
I think ultimately we'll see so much more competition and improved user experiences. I mean, how often do you, when you apply for a financial service, get frustrated because you have to submit a document, or you get a bounce back because it's not complete, or there are questions, or the information is all around you and is federated across all your service providers, yet every time you sign up for a new service, you have to do everything all over again. And I think when you think about open finance and open data, I think the automation of mundane tasks is something that cannot be stopped. It is something that the European Commission recognizes, and it's going to drive a new generation of not just financial services, but every industry that we know. And I think recognizing this and embracing this and understanding what the benefits are for your own balance sheet and for your customers is the first step of taking this forward. So consumer delight is really where it's going to head to.
Awesome. Adrian, what is your opinion?
I agree with both what Lea and Jan said. So I think it's a combination of all factors. I think, especially when we talk about B2B, we're still a bit behind B2C. Again, it's consumer delight. It's really what in the end, and the customer are by now used to working with digital solutions. So if you go to a SME and tell them you still need to send in papers, they're not really, it's not really where they want to go. Mm-hmm. So it will really be a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. At some point in time, you need to be digital, you need to be smarter, you need to be more efficient, because that's where all the others are going. And then down the line, you will have an environment that is beneficial for the end consumer and that is beneficial for the stakeholders in the game.
Awesome. Yeah, that was about it. I would like to thank you. It was a really a great pleasure to have you three in this panel, because I'm also a customer at Moss, a customer at FinTech Systems. I've used the banking switch automation service. How do you call it?
SwitchKit.
That's what I meant. And so I'm a big fan. And my wish for you now is that you sometime become a user at a Friendsurance solution, and to keep in mind that open finance also includes insurance. And that was it for our panel. Thanks a lot.
Right now, here, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you first of all for the panel. I would like to know how do you see open finance and blockchain connected?
Did you get that?
Open finance and blockchain connected was the question. So good, I'm not a blockchain expert, and the answer goes.
I mean, we don't have so much time left, but I think blockchain technology is also a huge part of my vision of open finance. Of course, this must be like a part of the open finance strategy we are currently discussing. And by the way, some Bitkom advertising maybe for the working group FinTechs and Digital Finance. And you are more than welcome. I've never seen you there. So next week, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, we will be discussing like the European consultations for open finance and PSD2. And all of you are more than welcome to join this hopefully vibrant discussion. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think Kevin has Mitgliedsantrag with him. We can fix that.
Is your question answered?
Oh, just one thing that I would like to add regarding blockchain. I think industry, for example, the German Mittelstand, they're already working with blockchain on industrial solutions. So just outside of the fintech space, for example. So combining that together with everything that we have been discussing in open finance is something that will be part of it, because blockchain is something that has a lot of benefits in a lot of different use cases. So this combining it together with all the finance topics will be highly relevant in the future.
If I can add my 2 cents. I mean, at the end of the day, blockchain is a technology and open finance is an industry movement. So one way or another, there will be some intersection somewhere. And I think if we ever get there, I mean, there are currently talks about, for instance, having an EID, a self-sovereign electronic ID service that would be embedded in wallets that could use DLT technologies. Well, these types of electronic identification services would be critical to getting the user experience for the authentication of access to information. And if that's sort of where EID is heading, and if that's where open finance is heading, then blockchain will be a critical component of this ecosystem going forward. But the question is if and when. I don't know if it's going to go in that direction or when it's going to go in that direction, but we're participating in those discussions to see how that could develop.
Is that an answer? Sure. Okay. So any other questions right now? That's not the case. So thanks a lot, Adrian, Jan, Lea, and Sebastian. Thank you.
Thank you.